Hello. Okay, so what is this all about? Hmm, I suppose the best way to describe it, bit messy here. Almost had Wolverine hair there. I guess the best way to describe it is I'm a lifelong fan of all kinds of different um, franchises, from Star Wars to X-Men franchise, Marvel Cinematic Universe. Uh, I'm sure by the time I've ended this sentence, I'll probably be paying out multiple dollars worth of money for the sake of the trademarks. But seriously, I've been I've been a fan of things since the days in which people were up in arms about Michael Keaton, uh, who was before then famous for films like Gung Ho and Mr. Mom. An actor who was well known for his comedies at the time, like Tom Hanks at that point as well. And of course, people really. I mean, it wasn't as if there was this tall sort of. Wasn't as if there was this tall sort of threshold to pass as the previous Batman to Michael Keaton's was Adam West's. Yes, that Adam West, the one who just couldn't figure out what to do with a bomb in his own Batman movie. But the point was, he turned out to be a fantastic Batman. He in fact so fantastic that they've decided to bring him back. I mean, as long as the movie he's in doesn't get canned. A lot has changed since 1989. Um, a lot has changed. I've certainly gained quite a bit of weight since then. In part because of poor exercise, but also in part because I grew from a small child, so that tends to put on the pounds as well. Um, but another aspect of that is that you know, Batman started something. For one thing, it started me looking at who the people behind the camera were, like Tim Burton, but also like Danny Elfman, for example. And that led me to just look at all different aspects of the film industry, and that eventually led me to want to become a filmmaker myself. Um, not It's not a goal that it's not a goal that I've been all that successful about, but I won't go into the reasons why. But suffice it to say, even if I've never fully carried out that dream, I did a lot of research and I did a lot of schooling in order to kind of get a better idea of what I was doing. And I've come up with my own fiction as well. Again, haven't yet made too much of that, but I've done it enough to where I know how difficult it can be. I know that it takes, to do it right, to do it in a way that people can appreciate. It takes effort. It's not something that just gets done with a snap of a finger. And so I have some sympathy for example, I have some sympathy for George R. R. Martin. I know what it is to have a series get away with you. A plot that metastasizes to something much greater than it was supposed to be. I started a story that was supposed to be maybe 2 or 3 chapters worth of just a small mini adventure. But in my immaturity, I came up with a dozen characters, and then came up with it, and then did these full, you know, these full character profiles, and then from there, I did outlines, and then the outlines sprouted out of their outlines, and then oh, it can run away with you because simply you feel obligated to go down all these different paths and explore things in their fullness. But it also taught me a lot about a subject that I feel has become, I think, too much of an obsession. I know people like their stories to be consistent, but we have to stop for a moment and admit to ourselves a key, objective, and overwhelming truth. And that is, it's all BS. It is BS stacked on top of BS stacked on top of BS. People don't. People don't. I mean, in today's day and age, with sophisticated audiences, sophisticated, fictional universes, people don't want to admit something that is simple and true, and that is that it's all BS. That at the end of the day, you're making things up. And like anything made up, it lacks reality's ability to remain self consistent, true to itself, effortlessly. Pardon me. It lacks, a work of fiction is something that has to be organized to the point where it seems spontaneous. You gotta know your characters inside and out. You gotta know um, your locations, your settings, time periods, or whatever. You gotta know, if you're doing a science fiction or fantasy work or horror, supernatural or whatever. You have to know what the rules and the systems and all these other things are, because you've got to be the one to cook up the, I guess, the external symbolic sort of signs of this seeming reality underneath. I mean, like, for example, if you're let's talk about the Sixth Sense from 1989. Not 1989. A little stuck on the Batman thing. 1999, which is one of those banner years for films, and it's like, how do we talk about ghosts, and they're easy. It's easy to summon up images to talk about ghosts. Like, we can talk about, you know a for example, we can talk about how a ghost walks through walls. You know, and we can do. I mean, today, your average child with software of minimal cost can create a ghost walking through a door. In fact, I think the software to do it is basically free these days. It's not something you need to do in Nuke or any other of the you don't need the George Lucas Saber compositor from ILM to make that work. No, no, you don't. It's simple. But it's such a dreadful cliche. I mean, back in the day, when you know when cinema was just beginning, when theater was just beginning. Um, there's a I forget the names. I think it starts with a P. There is a technique where you have a semi-silvered mirror, and you reflect up the image of somebody or something you want to be, show up with a ghostly presence on stage, and it looks transparent because of the way the mirroring is set up. And that was being done back before the turn of the 20th century. So, the idea of the ghost is as old as sin. At least in terms of the special effects. In terms of other things, it's even more so than that. But what about the sense of the ghost? What about the sense of how the ghost violates the the realm of the living? The way in which a ghost might do things that are socially inappropriate, like that one lady in that one sequence, the lady who would cut her wrists, the abused woman who basically goes, you can't harm me anymore, and scaring the hell out of poor Cole Sear, the main character. Um, but then there's that kid who Cole sees in the hallway. Shh, you want to check out my father's gun? And then the kid turns around and the back of his head's blasted out. That violation of that sense. Oh, that's just a normal kid. No, that. Oh, normal kid. No, you know, the ugly shock, the ugly surprise, the way in which these ghosts become intrusive into spaces that should be safe, including that one poor young girl who gets killed by Munchausen's by proxy. Um, how she is, how she is portrayed as kind of invading that kid's space, and oh, when she's doing it, it's, "Ah!" And that's part of the horror. But what Shyamalan does in that particular movie, and he does well. I mean, he's not always the best filmmaker, but when he is good, he is very good, and that's in part because he at least understands some part of what makes these things seem more a violation of reality as we know it, of normal, of the normal environment around us. And that's sort of the thing that we can talk about the difference between presenting a thing as a symbol and presenting a thing in such a way that you get the gist of what it's supposed to represent. Like, I mean, it's the difference between the way, you know, Bryan Singer, for all his faults, when he directs X-Men 2, he he and also X-Men Days of Future Past, he understands how to sell the mutant abilities with a bit more eeriness and subjectivity. He knows how to kind of get that in there. And why am I emphasizing all this? Why am I so focused on this? Because there is a difference between, simply giving an audience what they want and really giving the audience something they want. It's there's so much it's why I like to call the shower singing effect. When we sing in the shower, we're not remembering the notes, typically. A typical person isn't remembering the notes. They don't have the sheet music in front of them. They're simply doing their best reconstruction of that song from memory. And though it might sound good there, I mean, a lot of people might be like Eddie Murphy in 48 Hours singing Roxanne, you know, which is funny because of how off key he does it. There is there is a skill set. There is, people are taught how to do these things, and they need to be taught for a reason. And whether you go to film school or you come out of a radio, TV, film program, which is what I did basically, or if you just saw stuff on YouTube and just decide to learn it and go at it, whatever means by which you got educated, you had to be disillusioned in some part, because what you go in thinking is great and good and works isn't necessarily what actually does work. But there's that word, work. It doesn't work. I mean, it's what I see in all kinds of YouTube criticism. This show doesn't work. This show is a failure. This show has failed. Lord Almighty. It would be if I saw that it was just regularly um, stuff that genuinely failed at its task, that nobody liked. I might be less annoyed by it, but I'm sorry, I am annoyed by it because very often it's there's a silent premise there in the argument. There's a silent premise, and that premise is for me. It doesn't work for me, and very often, people people attend to the works in question, trying to find fault, trying to pick things apart. But that's not what the average person is not looking to be tensed up, to be vigilant, to be, just the average person just wants to watch a story. Just wants to get, just wants to experience something. They're not looking to be, they're not looking, they aren't necessarily these people who have, you know, read and watched all the media involved. But that doesn't mean, you just can. I am not arguing here for a lack of care, for a lack of, sophistication, for a lack of, you know, I'm not saying that people shouldn't take care, shouldn't be meticulous if they need to be, but I am saying that at the end of the day, this kind of storytelling, one, it's a skilled profession for a reason. Not everybody knows best about what works and what doesn't. It takes quite a bit of study to figure out how the tricks of the trade work, how a sequence builds, how a sequence properly concludes, why some things land and some things do not. But you can't please everybody. That's one thing that should be pointed out. You can't please everybody. It's we are not modems. I've got an example of one right next to me. Every bit that comes from my computer that goes here and goes to the Google and YouTube servers, wherever they are, every bit is perfectly copied. And if it's not perfectly copied, it's redone and sent again. Why? Well, because that's the way a machine like this does it. But we often kind of get into the problem of um, treating books, treating films like they're this kind of information exchange. That it's, you have to do this and this and this and this, but they're not. They don't work that way. They're not. There's not. I mean, believe me, I tried to figure out, in my sort of rabbit hole sort of mentality, I tried to figure out a universal set of rules for how to make a good movie. And what I eventually learned is that there are plenty of there are plenty of principles of aesthetics as to how you can communicate something. There are plenty of guidelines as to what tends to work the best, like the 180 rule in cinematography. If you don't want it to seem like your characters are switching sides willy nilly, you know, keep the conversation consistent. There's a good and a bad way to frame somebody in, like for example, what I'm doing right now, the way I'm sitting, a little headroom up here, you know, my I'm not cut off at any particular place. And guess what? Look where I'm sitting, right along the third line of the image. That is deliberate. Why? Because our eyes tend to like this way of focusing on things. So, so the question then becomes, and here I am at the other third slide. The question then becomes, okay, if there aren't perfect rules, if there aren't, then how do we establish what's good and what's not? And I think we need to realize that this is a communication field. This is not merely art, is by its nature communication. We are transferring something over, but it's not simple bits of literal data. What we are transferring over is a sense of things. We are trying to reconstruct in other people's brains experiences, a sense of the environment, a sense of what's inside people's heads. We're trying to reconstruct things, information that is perhaps a bit deeper within, a bit, you know, things of greater depth and complexity than what just literal images and literal words can convey. We're trying to get people this sense of a situation rather than just the literal information about a setting. We could just spin a camera around 360 degrees on a set and say, "Oh, that is the information on where the chair is, where the other chair is, where the table is." That's not what information people consider important. Those things are really only important in terms of how it leads people to understand the situation. Like, I'm sat down at a table, somebody walks into the bar. They walk in with they you know what might I focus on if I wanted to convey a sense of threat? Well, a nice close up with a wide angle lens to emphasize depth with a gun in their hands, stuck by their, you know, held down by their thigh, ready to be drawn up to be shot at me. And I could be right there, and then another set of shots could have me fooling around with my gun in my holster, slowly drawing it out as we talk. And the things we're talking about might indicate, what's the situation between the two characters. You know, hey Jim, I heard you found that silver mine down in, you know, you know, Cold Creek. I'm coming up with these names on short notes. Yes, I heard you were a bit, you know, un. You were a bit disappointed to learn that I'd already laid claim to it. And the guy goes, "Sure was." Well, I'm here. Let's talk it out. The one guy could say, my character at the table, and you could develop the situation from there. But already, you're seeing, if you're not one of those people who can't see anything in their mind's eye. I'm betting you're seeing at least something in your mind's eye as I describe it, and you know the kinds of shots that I'm talking about. You understand that cinematic language because you too have been kind of brought up from birth to understand it. It is as much a taught language as the English language is, or any other language on the face of the planet. Only it can be a lot more universal you know than than the spoken languages. You slap a subtitle in some films, and you can understand them despite the fact that they were, written and made in an entirely different language. So, what is this point contributing to things? Well, that there is an underlying art and that it is important. It does contribute to it's something that needs to be done, particularly with adaptations. I think this is where it often comes into play because we can imagine, we if we're not I don't know, a fantastic a fan if we don't have aphantasia, you know, we can see in our mind's eye when we read that book. We can see the characters, we can see the settings, we can see all sorts of things, and it is a valid, criticism to go, okay, this portrayal of this location was disappointing, da 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 da, and it's a subjective thing. So some people might be perfectly fine with, and for good reason, might be something that other people are not perfectly fine with. But we also have to realize that there are some objective, you know, that there are some objective challenges to doing settings, to doing anything. uh, yeah. Do. You just had to interrupt me. And there we come to another element of this. I mean, why do we love these sort of movies, these sort of things? Because they're powerful, because they make us feel great and um, powerful things. We want to see the. Let's see. Can I? Yeah, let's see. Let's see. No, 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 no. Fuck no. Remove moderator. Let's see. Put user in timeout. For how long? Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for that. Sorry for that, folks. I mean, future viewers. Somebody just had to be a smart aleck. People who can't express anything more than just how edgy and antisocial and bigoted they are. I guess titling things the way I did serves as a bit of a kind of bait for those folks because I guess I asked for that. But still, I'm not going to let somebody, tarnish my. It's like, folks, what is your point? What is the point of all these things we do? Some people, they look at communication and all they can see is the power they have over other people, the magic they see, and they want to take things over. They want they want to use that skill that I've been describing, and they just want to use it to suit their agenda because they think they've got the best ideas of all, because they think everybody else is just a weakling who doesn't deserve a point of view, because they think that it's all going to hell and it should all go into their hands so they can take it wherever they want to. And they call it they call folks who want less prejudice, less, you know, who want the opposite of what they want. They call them woke. Have you guys really considered how many of the people whose work you enjoy are the way they are because of what folks like you did to them? You think, Hollywood is full of people who want to beat down prejudice and bigotry just because? You get to want to say things, to hear things from creators. Hmm. Let's see. Put user in time out. Yeah, that's useful. It's like they want control. They want control and they don't care about anybody handing it to them. They want to take it for themselves. And that's one of their biggest weaknesses, their greatest desperations is that they will never do what it takes to understand other people enough, to look into other people's eyes enough, to be human enough. They'll never do enough of that to actually get people enough to be that compelling. They have to steal other people's compellingness. I mean, a great example, another 1999 classic, The Matrix. All If you look through all the making of sort of stories, it turns out it's very much a trans allegory, because the creators, they were they didn't just go trans out of the blue. They were that way all their life, and they were in the closet. And one particular scene, the scene which Neo responds to, you know to Agent Smith, going, the end is coming, and Mr. Anderson, and Neo goes, "My name is Neo," and bashes the guy into the roof of the subway tunnel, and then leaves him to get run over by the train. That that is very representative of an idea of a somebody. They were, one of them was thinking of committing suicide that way by leaping into the way of the train, and instead it's not they who die, it's It's the forces, trying to keep them in that place so that they die, that they are destroyed. The people, that idea is compelling, but they have to steal that idea. They have to steal the red pill idea. They have to steal the idea of fake news. They have to steal all these different ideas, all these different words, because they are creatively sterile. And why are they creatively sterile? Because they adhere rigidly to doctrines that do not allow them to think for themselves. They must be orthodox. They must fit in that slot they've been given. They have to fit in that square hole, no matter what shape they are. And that leaves them no room to actually get their mind into things, actually examine things, prize them apart, see how the engine of the symbol works, and actually do something new. They don't get that. They don't get that to do that, they have to sacrifice that orthodoxy, that they have to let themselves look at something in a new and original way for the first time. They think, you know, the answers to everything, they're just there, literally there. Just follow the rules, just do this. They don't understand that, well, at the risk of making a catchy sort of phrase here, rules are tools. Rules are just something there to achieve some end. Like the 180 rule, for example. That's not, you don't have to obey the 180 rule. You can have your characters, you can shoot your characters from anyway. The only reason why you adhere to that rule is because it gives you consistent perspectives that let that give the audience a sense of where each person is, and the geography, the point of the rules, the point of all these things we talk about, the point is to give a consistent structure that allows something to be conveyed, that allows something to be communicated. But no, you have these people who are, just they're creature of the rules. Even if they're, even if they're what their whole selling point is. Oh, I break the rules. Look at me. I say a bad word. I say this racist thing. Well, gee, aren't you special? Aren't you the edgiest edgy person since Rob Liefeld, put pen to paper? Oh man, it's you're trapped either way. If you're all about breaking the rules, or if you're all about following the rules. What's important is to understand what the rules mean. Then you can understand what rules should be kept and what rules really should be tossed aside or just used at one's convenience. Some rules matter, some rules do not. And some rules are just there because, you know what? Do you really want that to be your legacy? Do you really want that to be what defines you? I see so many people who are trying to do things like review bomb. I find review bombing particularly obnoxious. You know, they can't. It's you're trying to exploit the system to make something look worse than it is. You know what you're gonna do? Gonna make some at best. You're gonna make something look underrated. You know, people are gonna look and see. That wasn't bad. Those are just a bunch of you know, those are just a bunch of idiots. And it's really you're trying to make things fail, make other people fail. That's such Other people's failure does not equal your success. It doesn't mean that you've become more compelling. It doesn't mean that you've become more that your culture is going to triumph, especially if you don't. I mean, why, for example, does Trump, why did he succeed in getting the Republican nomination? Why did he? Why? How did that guy become your compelling answer to Obama, which is what Trump really is? You know, the Well, let's examine what Trump is. Trump is a celebrity with no experience who is renowned for his speeches and so on and so forth. You, you know, the choice of Trump was as defined by Republicans losing to Obama as Republicans losing to Obama was. It was a self own, but also what he also was. Why was it possible? Well, guess what? Because Trump was colorful. He had a compelling presence. He said things people shouldn't say. He did things people shouldn't do. And that was very valuable to people, I think, when we're talking about a political field that was full of such sterling examples of compelling, charismatic character as Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush and folks like that. I mean, I can't even remember the rest of the of the of the vast field of candidates that was offered forth in 2016. It's They were colorless. And why were they colorless? Why were they all these obnoxious, low charisma characters? I will tell you why. Because of the orthodoxy that had developed over time. Because the Republican Party has defined itself by what it is not, what its members are not allowed to be, what they're not allowed to think, what they're not allowed to say. Trump is a rebellion against that as much as he is an apotheosis of it. Trump, I think, in many ways was Republicans sensing, oh, we just got these gray sort of mush sort of people, and I guess we're just going to go crazy and let things go out of control. And of course, they want everybody else to follow along with them because they must have the right idea now. They're falling right back into that orthodoxy trap, and they're stuck right back into their own choices, and they have to defend that guy no matter what. And so that's one aspect of it. That's one aspect of the orthodoxy, that folks are trying to enforce very often in these sort of failure and does not work and other things. So on one hand, we have people who honestly did not like something, did not feel it was up to snuff, and that's okay. You know, but they overshoot things and go, "Oh, it does not work, period. It does not." You know, when in fact it could in fact work for many people and did work for many people. That's a thing we need to keep in mind. It's the provisional nature of communication. You don't have to, you know, things do not have to be perfect to be entertaining, to be compelling, to be loved. I mean, look at Star Wars. I mean, look at Star Wars, or more importantly, listen to Star Wars. You half-witted, stuck-up nerf herder, or I know that's probably an imperfect quotation of it, but still, who else in science fiction talks that way? Or the dialogue in Star Wars movies is not perfect and sterling and like you know Tarantino on steroids. It's not. Boy, it's like these were never perfect and orthodox things to begin with. Star Wars was you know it broke the mold in so many ways. It did so many things that were not supposed to work, according to people. It the There's a sort of a cult film aspect to it that somehow, because probably because of the compelling effects and the mythic nature of the story, that it was something people had not imagined before. And out of that grows this whole industry, this whole proliferation of science fiction and fantasy. But you know what? At the root of it, you know, at the root of it, there's some pretty left wing politics. If you go through the history of it, who are the rebels? The rebels are essentially the Viet Cong, and we're rooting for them. And why are we rooting for them? Because we root for freedom fighters more than we root for those who are just trying to conquer and subjugate. But of course, stories tend to be, the stories get turned around by folks who want to utilize the power of it. Like Ronald Reagan calling his missile defense system Star Wars. It's and like right wing folks calling what they're doing red pilling, when in reality their orthodoxy is the very definition of blue pilling. You take the pill, you wake up in your bed and you believe whatever you want to. You don't believe the difficult truth. Like, what's the difficult truth? For example, COVID, that it's not just some, you know, people overreacting to a cold virus, that it's something serious that sent damaging waves of people heading towards the hospitals because they couldn't frickin' breathe. People made it out to be, oh, vaccines are bad, and that's the red pill thing. And everybody values that sort of, dark secret sort of aspect of it. But what was the reality? Was the reality, oh, there's nothing wrong with the world. There's nothing wrong. It's not actually more preferable to be in that pod, nice and warm, rather than cold and eating snot in a post-apocalyptic, darkened hellhole of an existence where you have to go 2,000 miles underground to find heat and safety from the machines who are marauding, growing you in farms. That's that's things being worse, considerably worse than one would be led to believe. But in all actuality, no. The red pills here, the people calling themselves red pills, are buying into a comforting delusion. Everybody wants the power of storytelling, but the thing to keep in mind about all that is that at the end of the day, there's something real behind it. At the end of the day, in reality, you know, like I was saying earlier, the people like the ones who invaded my comment section for a little bit, they
Let me figure out what we're gonna do for dinner before the baseball game starts.
mm, reality tends to intrude. Reality tends to intrude. A lot of what we do is about talking to each other about this reality we're in, but a lot of it can also turn into something more like brainwashing each other, brainwashing ourselves about what reality is. The whole good guy with a gun thing. I mean, as a person who learned the arts of screenwriting, I come to understand. Okay, you need to time things just right so that the character is just you know this far away from being able to save the other character. And you know I wrote an entire section in one part of my story which was essentially just about a race against time to get to a character before another character brought harm to them. And it had to you had to get the machinery of that down to the moment by moment, because otherwise if you let there be any sort of slack in it, you would lose the tension. But that creates a curious little artifact when it comes to how people see things happening in movies, and that is, if you have the race to save the day, things have to be as close to calamity as possible, if not over into it. They have to kind of the gears have to go like in Heat, where they're arriving after the bank robbery, and just before just before the guys leave from the bank that they're robbing, and then you know one of the bank robbers spots them and raises the gun, and the famous firefight begins. You know, it's why do things work in this way? Well, why do they work in this way? Because that is what makes something entertaining. We're going beyond just simply doing what might be a documentary style sort of you know we're going beyond just doing what might be a documentary style kind of well, how a real shootout would take place. You know, the collateral casualties, the or folks just being so late that it just doesn't matter. You know the police. You know, well, like what if instead of having this sort of edge of your seat sort of okay, these people are doing the bank robbery and all these other people are tracking down their actual bank job, and they just happen to get right at the point where the bad guys are about to escape and the good guys are about to lose them, and it just ding, crosses right at that proper point. The that those sort of mechanics, those are in there because of the need for entertainment value, to amplify the feel, to amplify the sense of something, of the tension in the story. But reality doesn't have to obey. Reality can be a cop, on the beat or in a patrol car, happens to see the crime in progress, and either there's a confrontation and it ends up in a hostage situation with the with the bank robbers stuck in the bank with the hostages, and or there's some sort of or the cop this one cop happens upon it, and oh no, he's not enough. There are all these guys armed with AR-14s in the bank, and when they come out and oh, bang bang bang, all of a sudden you know the cop is being pinned down by all these bank robbers, and you know the bank robbers unfortunately are causing a lot of collateral casualties along the way, and it isn't until minutes later that other more heavily armed cops come in, and you know and you get, I mean, that might be a more original way to do it, but point is point is in real life things are not subject to the dictates of what would make a good story. Instead, things are subject to the dictates of causality. They're subject to okay, who's here at this moment, who's there at the other moment, you know, how do things intersect? You know, what's the plain simple truth? I mean, if you have two different sides shooting at each other, you know, there's no law of physics that says that the bullets have to avoid innocent people. But that's what people imagine. They imagine the good guy with the gun's gonna come in, save the day, only shoot the bad guy, and they're gonna be just in time. Why do they expect the good guy to be just in time? Why? Because they've seen it a million times. That's the thing. That's one of the things about storytelling that we're kind of neglecting in this day and age, is that part of how we learn about reality beyond our own personal experience is storytelling, and which that adds another layer to the question of why shouldn't we just let these people who want everything to, you know want the stories to be done a certain way, why don't we just let them do what they want to do? And this is part of the answer, and part of the answer is, as much as they can build up these tropes of the good guys winning, the good guys with the guns winning, and these other things, as much as they can build up these ideas about how these sort of things are supposed to go off, what how things actually work. The fact is, what they want may be incredibly misleading. They, and that's not to say that, you know, the liberal movies that, or the centrist movies that Hollywood makes are any more, truthful. They've got their own sort of, you know, the classic. You've got the classic sort of. Um, you got the classic sort of '90s thing of, oh, we're coming to bring democracy. Uh, I mean, I remember that 2000 Dungeons and Dragons movie with Dora Birch's character going, "I declare all people free and equal," as if that would do it. As if there weren't decades worth of history between the mages and the ordinary people that kind of make the that would give rise to tensions and complicate this. As we saw in Russia, as we saw in so many places, it wasn't as simple as, oh, democracy trumps the days save everything is good and everything is great. You know, we need the room in our storytelling to be free to tell our own stories, not have to bow down to somebody's orthodoxy. We need the free room in order to be able to provide alternative views. It's and that's the thing that, okay, you object to the way. I mean, well, let's be blunt here. It's not an accident that, say, Gina Carano, who was great in The Mandalorian, but unfortunately, kind of was a bit too outspoken for her own contractual good. You know, uh, she was. It wasn't too long before people were offering her jobs over to do their work at their sort of outfits, the Daily Wire and things like that. It wasn't too long before there is a whole industry, and I know this particularly being a Baylor graduate. There's a whole industry of of work that is done for right wing audiences, for the uh, for Christian audiences, for conservative, and whatever audiences. I'm sure that there are films and things that are even made for racist audiences. There sure are books that are written for them. There's this whole trope of, oh no, John Ringo, where he's got all these hideous books featuring all this sort of rape and you know domination stuff. But there, if you look hard enough, there is work for anybody. But that's not what they want, or that's not all they want. They don't just want a voice. They want their voice to be the dominating, controlling voice. You know, I'm sure Gina Carano doesn't want to be simply, you know, a niche product. I don't think she wants to be just, somebody in Tucker Carlson's boutique little production house. I think she would love to have the high profile she had before, but that's not what she. That's not what they want. That's not what any of them want. They don't want to just be niche. They want to be big, like Hollywood is big. They want control of things. They want to control. They want to snuff out that pro transgender message. They want to snuff out that pro gay message. They want to snuff out anything that you know, doesn't fit within their nice, tight little orthodoxy. They want things to go their way and they don't care what they have to do in order to force it to be. But the irony of it, and why it's important to resist this sort of thing, why it's important to call it out. Well, what is it in the end? What is it that we're doing? What is that I'm doing? Communication. They this is a nation, a republic, a free nation. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, I know the stereotype is that liberals don't love America. Oh, quite the contrary. I, I am very much in love with this country, but not just because it's a nice idea. It's better than that. It's a neat idea. It's a wise idea. There is something underneath it that is better than the alternatives. And I'll tell you why. You're dealing with a lot, I imagine. You're having to deal with higher gas prices. You're having to deal with higher grocery prices. Everything's taking an age of the earth to to get shipped. Your PS5. Where is my PS5? Where is my PS5? I very much like one. If you no don't don't worry. I don't I'm content with my. Uh, but point is, we all have these grievances, these conditions in our lives, and part of what we do in dealing with government is that we want the government to kind of help in those things where it's kind of you make things easier in certain ways, like having roads, good internet, things that make the rest of the tasks and the things in our lives easier. Lower interest rates so that we're not, paying an arm and a leg to the lenders. You know, easier to get into housing. To so we can raise a family. Good. Getting good jobs for one thing. We whether we're liberal or conservative, we want government to be helpful to us, to our cause. But of course, on the other side of things, the people who gather power to themselves to become members of our government, who, seek our, to be elected by us, they, of course, they're not necessarily the most scrupulous people when it comes to what they do in order to get what they want. And at the same time, there are all sorts of different things happening right now. It's uh, hey Google, what temperature is it outside? 101 degrees, and it is after 6 o'clock. Hmm, a bit of a challenge to deal with, isn't it? We could have done something about things like this 10, 20 years back if we had gotten on the ball. But of course, there are people who had their interests in getting in making sure that we didn't react to what the science was telling us about what would happen if carbon emissions kept up. And so they told their pet politicians to just say, "Oh, it's a hoax." This is they love to say something is a hoax, and rarely do they actually seem to check to see whether it actually is. But of course, that 101 degrees outside my window, that's not a hoax. That's real. We're dealing with these temperatures and we're going to be dealing with them for quite some time to come, and that's going to have consequences. And it's things like that, things like, say, the flood plains or the hurricanes. What happens when the hurricanes blow through? What happens afterwards? How do we fix things? These are policy decisions that make a difference in reality. They're not just, it's not just a story. It's not just a competition between Republicans and Democrats. It's an objective result. And to have people just utterly control what is essentially communication, things don't get taken care of. If you can suppress mention of a thing, if you can say that's not important, you can't really talk about that. If the government can go and say, don't talk about this, chemical spill here, does that remove the chemical spill? No, of course not. No, the chemical spill remains, and it has its objective effect on people's health. Whether it's an acute effect like people dropping dead because of it poisons them directly, or does it have a mutating effect on their genes and it causes them cancer 5, 10 years down the line? We need to realize that a lot of the decisions that are made, it's not just about politics. It's not just about ideology. It's not just about uh, orthodoxy. There's no orthodoxy on this planet that can fully contain the broad scope of possibilities of what can happen, or that fully explores and extends into the space of what should happen, what should be done. We are all we are all at a certain level inadequate to the challenge. And the only way we get more adequate to that challenge is that we learn, we discover, we get different points of view, we get people arguing back and forth, hopefully in a more logical and reasoned way rather than just in emotional defense of our mutual political orthodoxies. There's a reality out there that we can only confront if we are free to talk about it in a robust way. It's not just about control. In fact, it's about how much control we don't have and how much we need to be able to broaden our perspective, to hear from other people, to learn from other people. And we can't do that if everything is just narrowly constricted by one side's orthodoxy. If the Republicans win, what happens the next time a COVID-19 style virus comes in? Will we be like China having to deal with, you know, an outbreak that, is outpacing the government's attempts to try and cover up what's going on? Hmm? If China had been a more open society, they might have stopped COVID from spreading so quickly and so utterly, because they got concerned about, well, what does this make me look like as a provincial official, or what does this make the Communist Party look like in terms of how capable it is? They weren't thinking, what does this mean in terms of what this thing is going to do within our population? They thought of the appearance, the narrative, the story side of it before they thought about the reality side of it. What was happening there and how that would ultimately shape reality. It's something that authoritarian governments often have a real problem with. People think, okay, if I can manipulate people's perception of reality, I can manipulate reality. And that's really only to the extent that you can manipulate people into affecting reality. The truth is, ultimately, you can't change reality by changing people's minds about it. We have to be free to be able to deal with the world as it is. But we can't do that without allowing people the room to think for themselves, the room to believe for themselves. And although you might say, "Oh, well, that's that we shouldn't have things that are woke or cancellation of people who say something terrible or whatever," that's part of the exchange. You know, Gina Carano, for example, she was able to say whatever she wanted. It just meant that she did get to keep her, job with Disney and had to go work for Tucker Carlson's company. It's you, but really, people shouldn't have to be forced into saying what you want them to say. No, people should be, if people want to be woke. That's them. And to the extent that that works in a business environment, well, they'll lose or gain strength as it goes along. And if you want to challenge that, fine. But unless you're going to be, well, unless you're going to be kind of a little twee about it, you know, precious about it, you're going to have to build whatever following you can gain on your own. And if that's not within your means, well, reconsider what your message is. Reconsider what your position is. Reconsider how you're relating to people as you communicate to them. Because at the end of the day, it is communication. And communication has two sides to it. you're not the only person involved. Well, I guess that's it. I didn't get to talk so much about the things that I wanted to talk about, probably because I got a little angry at some of my commenters. But oh well. Y'all have a good day, and hopefully things will cool off. See you later.